Okay, welcome back everybody. For this next part of our repeating textures tutorial, what we're going to end up doing is blending two different textures. And as you see here, I have some flowers that seem to be cropping up in this field now. And if I were to go into perspective view and zoom out, you can see that flowers are sort of sporadically popping up. Now, this may, again, not look great when I am at this view, but if I were to go more towards the camera view and then walk around, that looks pretty good. So always remember that you should not be looking from perspective view, but you should be getting down to where your camera is going to be going. So this is what the blend is being done to these two textures. It's actually a layered texture. I'm going to show you guys how to make one of those things. If I were to turn off this ground and then show the grass material, this is the one that we created from the last of this series for just a grass repeating texture here. And that's what this one looked like. Now I also have another one, and this is with flowers. And as you can see, this looks a little maybe too much like there's flowers everywhere. So if we were to go with something like this, we have flowers popping up every once in a while. It makes it feel a little bit more organic. And if I again go to perspective view, I can show you the differences between those there, and there. So how do we create this flower texture? It's pretty easy. If we go into Photoshop, and let's just say, here's it done. Turn this one off, and I am going to basically have a duplicated version of the last one I just did. So I duplicated that layer, or that group, so duplicate group, and then I took that and I merged those layers so it became one image. From here, I went in and I just made an adjustment to my colors because I didn't want it to be 100% the same. Now you can do that, but I felt that by adding a little bit of a different color to the grass, it kind of broke it up a little bit more. So if we go from this grass to that grass, you'll notice it's a little bit lighter. So let's go to that the blend, and you can see how that's done. If we get close enough, it blends pretty well with each other. So again, it's something worth playing around with to see. This was just whipped up for this demo here, but you can go a lot further than that. You could even have like mud patches or bare patches of not mud, but dirt and things like that showing up. So how do we get this to turn into a flower field? Well, I ended up taking this layer, and again, I went into an adjustment layer, and I went to my hue saturation. So I added a hue saturation right here under adjustments to that layer. And I want to make sure it's only affecting that just in case I need to get to that other grass layer. So if I hold down the Alt key and go in between those two, you should see mine's already linked. So let me unlink that and then put that back here. So if you hold down Alt and then press the left mouse button, you'll link that in, and that's just a safe way to be able to work to ensure that we're not going to accidentally make this layer right here go and be altered by this hue saturation. And let me show you a little bit more in depth why that could be really bad. So let's say that your art director is coming through, there's your grass layers, and let's say that this is going to be my flowers. So I'm going to hit Control G and call that flowers. So if I'm doing that right now, if I were to turn this on and off, even though that hue saturation is inside of that layer or this group of the flowers, turn that on and off, it's still going to impact everything underneath that. So the easy way to fix that is just to hold down the Alt key and link that to the layer underneath it. Now I know that if I turn this on and off with this layer off, just in case, you'll notice it doesn't want to even get rid of that one. Just in case, I can't mess with it. So this prevents those terrible mistakes from happening, and that very much can happen. So always give yourself a little bit of a fail safe. As a matter of fact, earlier I had locked this layer, so I wasn't messing around with that. There we go. I have unlocked that layer. So here is grass. It's got a hue saturation shift on that. All I did was go in the properties of that and drag the hue a little bit, and also some desaturation. Now that I have that set up for a different color for my background, I can make these things. And let's start from scratch. I'm just going to create a new layer here, and I'm going to make a ellipse. So I'm going to click change my color. Let's go maybe some white, and just click and drag, and I have a little petal. So now if I were to click and drag again, Control T, I can reposition that. Click and let's hit Control T this time. Sorry, let's hold down the Alt, left click drag, Control T. There we go. And Alt, left click drag, Control T. And left click drag, Control T. And there we go. So we got a little flower. Now, this doesn't look like a flower at all. It looks like a little star. There's no definition per petal. Let's fix that. Let's go in this layer, and we're going to go to our effects. We're going to go to a bevel and emboss. And I don't want this to go too far away from the center. I just kind of want it to highlight around there. So right now you're noticing that the angle is just a little bit off from the center. So I'm going to move that in the middle. There we go. I also don't want that size to be super big. I just want it to be enough to give some definition to it. And also, let's reduce that soften down a little bit more. The color is this purple gray. Let's change it to maybe something like that. Okay. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to hit OK. Now, how do I get that to all these other layers? Just right click on that layer, hit copy, select these, and paste. So right click, paste layer style. So there it is. And for whatever reason it absolutely wanted to ignore that, let's see if we can copy layer style and hold down shift and then left click to select all these other ones, and let's paste that layer style. Okay, there we go. So now we have some more definition on here. Now that I have that accomplished, the next step is to just add a center area. And let me make sure I don't do that on that layer. Let me go off of that. I'm just gonna deselect off of that and then go into new layer and then just add that. All right, now that I have this, let's change the color. We'll do color overlay. That's pretty good. And we'll do a bevel and emboss. And let's add a drop shadow to that. All right, let's reduce the spread of that. And okay, just playing around with this. And where's my bevel and emboss? It seems like it just completely went away. So chisel soft, let's go smooth and reduce or soften. Okay. So you may not have those issues that came up there for you. For me, those were affecting that. I also don't want green as my shadow. I went to orange with this, and that's looking pretty good. All right, let's group all these layers. So let's grab all these, group it, and we're gonna call that white flower. So now that I have this, I have a white flower. Here's some stuff I can change. If I do auto select, I should be able to drag these around. Remember, that's that thing we don't usually like to have on, but for this case, it's pretty nice because I can reposition some of these petals around. And now that I have that, I'm actually going to reposition this one up above that. All right, sure, that's fine. So we got a little flower, and it's labeled white flower. Once we know we like it, what we can do is duplicate this layer, or this group, and I am going to merge this group. So this is kind of the way to always be thinking about working. When you're done and you can move on, merge it. But don't ever get rid of your work. That's something that your art director may come by and she might say, hey, I like you got all these other things going on. Everything's great, but that white flower needs some work. Change that to being maybe, let's try a purple flower and change the shape of it. I don't like that it's 5. I want it to be like an 8-sided or whatever petaled flower. So if you merge that, and you didn't save the other version by duplicating it, then you're in some trouble. So it's a lot easier to work with it this way. Now that I have this, I can actually go into effects, and I'm going to do a drop shadow on this one just to give some depth around the back of this. So that's actually just all I need. Okay. Flowers. So I got 1 flower. And let's say I need some more. So let's just hold on the V key and Alt and drag. And now that we have something like this going on, I know it's not very glamorous. I'm just going to rotate some of these things around. And you notice when you click on one, Control T, enter, click, Control T, enter. Because we have auto select on, we don't have to go to that layer to select those. That's pretty nice. Now that I have this done, I've got a bunch of flowers. Let's see if we can mess around with this by just going into duplicating one of these. And where is that? That one. Of course. Okay, so I'm going to turn off auto select so I can find this one. Okay, there it is. So this one I'm going to turn into a purple flower. And to do that, I'm just going to go into my color overlay. And let's do overlay. And let's go purple. Okay, so overlay doesn't want to work for me yet. So let's try some other versions of these things. This may not work just by doing an effect to modify. So we might have to go into some other settings for it, but I am actually finding pin light and hard light to be pretty nice to work with. So I'm going to actually stay with that. All right, so I'm going to use this. So I've got that set at hard light, and that's inside of my flower copy. So we'll call this now purple flower. And now we're going to do the same thing. Hold down Alt, left click drag, Control T, rotate it a little bit, even give it a little bit of scale if you want. Free country. Hold on Alt, left click drag, Control T, and do that again. Alt and left click, Control T. And then Alt, left click drag. And Control T. Okay, so I've got these flowers and I've got it all inside of this layer right here. And then underneath that I have my grass layer. So I've got my 2 layers ready to go. I'm going to save this one now. And this will be my flowers demo. So I have my grass and my flowers. So I'm not going to do that because I've already got something set up for you guys to look at. And let's see what's going on right now. So inside of here, I've got a couple different things going on. One of the things that's going on, one second, I just want to make sure I get everything in position here. Okay. One of the things that's going on here is this mix that's going on, and it's under a layer shader. The layer shader basically tells Maya, use this material and then use a different material or texture, and you can do a lot of different things. You can have it blend in different ways using alphas, and that's basically how we're accomplishing our blend right here with the flowers. So if I were to do that from scratch, and how would I do that? That's going to be under. Let's go and create a material. We'll make a blend. Now, the way that we need to set this up, this is going to be, we'll call this class demo. And I'm going to graph this one so I can see it. Okay, so I have got this thing right here. There's nothing going into it right now. And remember, right click and drag down to graph network. So you can see that. I need to add color, but I need to add a lot of different things for color. So instead of going to what we usually do, which is go to file, we need to actually look for something different. So I'm going to go into the search bar and type in layer. And if I can spell correctly, layered texture is something that comes up. Cool. Layered texture is here. What this is going to allow for me to do is to be able to take different colors and blend those together. So we're going to do that. And one of the things that we need to be aware of is how this is going to blend. I need to first click over here so I have two. So you'll notice anywhere you click, you might end up adding more of these. So just make sure you have two of these. So it's very easy to add extra ones. I just need two of them. And for this one right here, I'm going to make that my one that goes over the other one. And you can see that this is declared as over. And this one actually will be none. So this is like a stack. This is the top. This is the bottom. So from this one, I'm going to add my color. So I don't need layer. I need file. I'll go to file. And I will load my flowers. So now that I have the flowers, this is another one that I've made. So if it looks a little bit different like what I just did, don't worry. That's similar stuff. So now that I have this right here, I am going to go ahead and click back on my layered texture. And click on this one. And go to File. And Grass. So I've got my grass. And I've got my flowers. So let me grab grass. Okay. So grass and flowers. So now I know that this top one, flowers demo, and this is grass. So in this layer setup right here, this is the one we need to make sure has an alpha on it. And so to add an alpha to that is as simple as clicking on this little checker box, and we're going to go to noise. Now that we've added noise, it kind of looks really weird, and what we're going to have to do is test this a couple times. So I'm going to right click and assign material to selection, and I'm also to make sure I'm using a blend right now. I would be teaching you guys Arnold, but I don't know how many people's laptops will like what we're doing, so we're using this layered texture that will work without Arnold. I'm going to drop specular color down so it's just more of a toon shader, and right away you can see if I go to my perspective view, that's gigantic. So how do we fix this? Well, that has to do with, where is my hypershade? Hypershade. We got so many windows open right now. Let me tell you, recording videos to teach at 11 o'clock at night. Super fun. All right, material attributes. Okay. It looks like Maya might have had a little bit of a problem, so we're gonna just reset it. And let's see if that fixed Maya here. Let's see. Nope. All right, let me pause this and we'll get back. Okay, we're back. I don't know why, but I was, Maya just didn't want to open my hypershade. I've noticed that with Maya 2020, you kind of just have to reset the view and it seems to come back after a while or whenever it wants, I guess. So what we need to do here is get our material to show up on our screen, and this is something that it looks like. Okay, we're back. Maya, for whatever reason, even though I told it to reset workspace, still didn't want to go, so I had to give it a full hard reset, and now it is showing my textures again. So if that happens, don't be afraid, save and reboot Maya. So what we were talking about last was how this is being shown, and one of the first things to take into consideration is your UVs. So in our first video, we talked about how to have repeating textures, and that's not actually happening yet for this specific material. So our class demo material right now has just 1 by 1 repeating texture. So that's not even repeating. So let's go 5 by 5 for the flowers. Let's also go 5 by 5 for the grass. And not really noticeable yet for what we're seeing here, but that's okay. And my repeating texture on my my alpha is actually set to 1 by 1, and I'm going to leave that alone so I can try to figure out how to get this thing to better work for what I'm trying to do here. So let's go back to our layered textures and look. This is set to over, and this is set to none. So that's how I want this to be. And let's see if we can make this thing actually behave for us now. So now that we have that, let's see if we can get this to display. So, what do we got to do? Well, one of the first things we need to do is, let me make sure that this one's got, this is my one in the oven, and this is my one I'm working on. So I have one prep for you guys. We need to make sure that our layer is visible is on, and over is on our first one. That's all set up. Our texture UVs are all set. So the next step is to go into what our noise map is looking like. This isn't going to give us a very good looking texture. And the reason why is that I have these little tiny spaces that are going to be blacked out versus giant gaps. And so I want to adjust that so it actually looks a little bit better for me. So one of the first things I'm going to do, and you're going to see it happening right now, I'm going to adjust that ratio. So I'm going to get that ratio down, and I have larger gaps here. Now, if I were to increase my frequency ratio, it's not really doing too much for me here. Let's say my time. Time is going to change the layout of this. So this, you should see that start to move around. I'll stay somewhere around there. Again, these numbers are not going to be something that I would copy 100%. I would wait until it looks good. Especially since all of your textures are going to be looking different because you've all made different looking ones. So now that I have that, I can go to my frequency. And right now, you'll notice the more frequency I go, the more like veiny it looks. So we want to kind of make it so, yeah, we have patches here, but we don't want it to be super patterned. So I actually want to maybe go something like that. All right, now that I have that going on, I can go into my density of this. And the density, I want a lot of this going on. If I go down to density of like this, you'll notice the flowers are kind of sporadically showing up. And yeah, that could be sort of okay. But I don't really know. Let's say, there we go. Something like that. All right, now for randomness and all that, let's go and change fall off to linear. I like that a little bit better than, let's say, bubble is just bizarre. Fast gives us that a little bit of a clunkiness. So I'm going to go to linear, and this allows me now to really play around with some of these values to get just to feel a little bit like it's actually broken up the way it should be rather than just sporadic pieces here. So let's keep something like this. Let's close this and look at what the camera can see. Okay. Right away, the first thing I notice is my UVs. I need to make these way smaller for these textures. So for my flowers, I'm gonna go to maybe something like 8 by 8, and for this one, let's leave this one alone, and let's minimize that. Okay. I think I even need to go even smaller than that. That's looking a little bit strange. So let's go back into our, let's go in here, 10 by 10, and let's even change these down to, let's go 8 by 8 on that. All right, let's see what this did for me. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Now with this texture, it's using really, really big flowers. If I were to change that, I'm going to change that really quick for you guys to see. This was the flowers that we were working on. I'm going to sample that one in now. So I'm going to save this as flower class demo. Okay. Now that I have this one, let's go back into our material. And we're going to look for where that is. It's being used in flowers demo. I'm just going to swap that out with a different texture. So that's flowers class demo. Let's hit open. And now let's look what that did. So let's minimize that. And now you have these clumps of flowers. And let's just go into our perspective view. And now you can see how these clumps of flowers are showing up. Now you can see clumps of flowers seem to have smaller little plant spots or grass spots than these, so we can adjust those now. We have our UVs for the grass, and that is at 8. Let's do that at maybe 10, and now let's close that. All right, that's looking a lot better. Now let's zoom out. What is being shown here? This is how the noise map is being used, and right now that noise map, that's, you can sort of see how that's being represented here. We have like a blob here and some over there. So again, that's all about frequency ratio, and our frequency, if we were to, let's scale that down, and let's play with the time on that so it looks a little bit different there. And then let's mess around with the density. So now we have something like that. Let's go with spottiness. I'm gonna try that. And size random. Let's try that too. What size random is gonna do is randomize how big these little blobs are. Randomness is, you can see how this is all aligned, and if I go this way, it's less aligned. So like that. And let's increase frequency one more time, and then let's minimize that. All right, let's look at what the heck happened here. Camera 1. All right, so the hills are alive with some random flowers, and that's looking pretty good for a really quick setup on here. Let's look at the difference on that. Let's look at grass. There was grass, and then there's an example of like a flowers layer, and then we have this one. Again, if we don't like where we're at, we can still go and mess around with this. I would probably try to, I'm going to increase this, but I also want to make it so it's not so tiny. So what that's going to be is one of these values here. Size, random, randomness. Frequency, there we go. So I'm going to increase the size of that, or decrease the size of that, and by decreasing the size of the frequency, you have less of this showing up. So much better. And again, time will change where those are showing up. I'm going to close that, and then now let's look at how that's going. So this is giving me more patches of flowers than the other setup. So this depends on what you're trying to do. I want you to play around with these values to see what you can come up with. Again, there's no right answer for this. What I'm looking for is something that you're showing me. You used your brain and got something that looks nice. And so this is how we can get randomized mixed layered textures. So it is a layered texture, but we're mixing two different materials to come up with this output. So that is how we're getting this to come up. So instead of these constant repetitions, we're getting kind of this offset. So that's looking pretty good. And again, we have our noise map, our grass, flowers, texture, and we could always change this too. So if we don't want this to repeat that much, we can even tell us to be 0.5 by 0.5. What that's going to do is make those maps even weirder. I wouldn't recommend going less. Maybe you could even go 2 by 2 on that, and you're going to get noise maps like that. So different reasons why you might want to use these things, but they're all linked together with those 2D placement sets. So that's something that I would say is definitely worth some experimentation. The major thing is it can get pretty tunnel visioned in here because the amount of different values that you can set up. So I always recommend don't go overboard with this. Play around with it. See if you can find something you like, and move on. Have some critique from somebody. There we go. So there's some randomized flowers. So in our next video, we're going to talk about how to put in a road, and then our last video will be about how to put in some sky. So right now I'm trying out this with the hardware fog, which seems to be actually working right now, which is good. I'm going to actually go back down to hardware fog and reduce that end a little bit, or increase that end a little bit more, just so I don't have that going all the way there. But there we go. That's starting to get a little bit better. All right. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and in that one we will explore how to add a road into this scene.